and Mahomes at bay.
The Tampa Bay Bucs, Super Bowl 55.
Hello and welcome to the Bucs Banter Podcast. I am your host, Collin Hallboom, and this is our 56th episode. So shout out to Lawrence Taylor. With it being the end of June, the draft is long gone. The majority of big name free agents have signed. OTAs have wrapped up. So things are a little slow this time of year, at least by NFL standards. But that doesn't mean we don't have anything to talk about, especially since we haven't recorded since Rob Gronkowski announced his retirement. Wah, wah, wah. So we're going to focus a lot on the tight end situation for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and we've brought in a special guest in order to do so. What options do the Bucs have at tight end? Do they need to make a move? What type of move would make the most sense? These are the type of questions that we are going to try to answer for you tonight. In doing so, I am joined by my co-host, Scott Capron, and we are expecting to have our other co-host join us at some point during the show. So now it is my pleasure to introduce a first-time guest on the Bucs Banter podcast, Laurie Fitzpatrick, at Laurie Fitzpatrick on Twitter. Does some fantastic work over at USA Today and touchdownwire.com. Laurie, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I'm excited to, talk about Cade, talk about tight ends. Them and fullbacks don't get that much love. So, I'm excited.
Love it. And just a reminder, you can catch all of my written work over at bucksgameday.com. Follow me on Twitter on the screen. All of our Twitter handles are up on the screen. Laurie, tell us, do you want to plug any of your work before I start bugging you about your background and introducing you to our listeners?
No, I mean, you got it. I'm with USA Today, Touchdown Wire. I also do some videos on YouTube where I'll take the articles that I write and kind of break them down in more of a film review session type of deal, with my face, and I'm kind of using clip draw telestration, kind of breaking it down that way. So anybody can find me on YouTube as well.
Love that. That's awesome. Have you done that for Cade yet?
No, I haven't done it for Cade yet. It's in the works. The article's a little bit, I wouldn't say easier, because it's definitely hard to write for me. I like to, go over film and just kind of, I'm used to that, when I used to play, being able to just kind of go over the film and watch it and kind of break it down while it's happening. But I don't use as many videos. So with the breakdowns on YouTube, I kind of have to make a bigger playlist and use more of the clip draw telestration to kind of put it all together. So it takes a little bit longer, but it's definitely more fun.
Awesome. I love that. Yeah. So, Laurie, we want to know a little bit about your background. How did you get into writing about football, to doing the video stuff? Tell us a little bit about how you ended up where you are. And you're doing a great job. I can't wait to talk about this most recent article. Laurie did a deep dive on Cade Otton, and it's fantastic. I shared it on my Twitter. I'll probably share it again. Super relevant to Bucs fans. But yeah, Laurie, tell us a bit about how you got to where you are.
Yeah, so I used to play football for the IWFL and the WFA. Those are like the two biggest leagues for women tackle football. And it's basically NFL rules and 2 feet in for the catch. Okay. Normal things like that. It's all NFL rules though. One motion at a time. But I played running back, corner. I played, returner. I also played a little bit of linebacker too. And those are the positions that I like to write about most, because obviously I played those positions. But I played for 5 years with a couple different teams up in Jersey. I played in Philly. We ran, pistol offenses, wishbone, RPOs, wing T, kind of like the old stuff. Ever since, I played, I just learned how to watch film, and I realized how important it was and how relevant it is. No matter what level you're watching or you're playing, it's all about the tape, right? And so then I started kind of like evaluating players, and whenever I would see something on TV, I would post it on Twitter. That kind of just gained traction, I guess. Maybe being a female, and not a lot of us are really breaking down the game. It's either, you're reporting, you're an agent, or you're on the sideline. But not a lot of women are really kind of breaking the game down and really understanding, what they're looking at. So, that just really started to kind of gain traction for me. I watched a lot of, even though I grew up in Philly, I watched a lot of the Jaguars. So I started doing it more with them. And luckily, Big Cat Country from SB Nation, they picked me up and they're like, "Hey, do you want to like do this a little bit more?" And so, I started doing it for them. And then I was part of SI a little bit too. For the Jags, and then luckily enough, I posted enough, and I really like diving deep in the game. Doug Farrar, amazing writer with USA Today, he asked me to join their team with Mark Schofield, so it's been awesome. It's been great, and I try to do as much as I can on YouTube too, because I like talking, as you could tell. So, so that's really all it's been. I'm just, I enjoy it so much just because, I grew up with my mom's boyfriend painting his face in the living room watching the Eagles, like,
Yeah.
when I was younger. So I was always like a huge fan. My brother I played a lot of Madden. So yeah, my whole life has been surrounded by football, and I was lucky enough to play it. So here I am today writing about it, and it's amazing to cover the NFL.
So why are you not an Eagles fan? That's what I gotta ask. Growing up in
Well,
Philly,
my mom
smashing out
asks me
football
that
player.
all the time. I like them. I shed a tear when they won. My dad got to see them win, and they really mean a lot to me. But my family always got so angry, always so angry at this team. So when you're 13, 14 years old, you want to kind of take your own path. So I always like to see my family happy. So I always, cheer for Philadelphia when they're playing. But I took an interest with other teams too. And, liking the Jaguars have actually given me more time to enjoy the rest of the league because of how kind of they weren't really that great. Besides the Jimmy Smith area, Fred Taylor, then MJD. But between those times, they weren't great. So I got to appreciate, watching all of the games. And I think that ended up working out for me. But yeah, I don't really have an answer for that. Just, I love the whole NFL.
Sounds like a very diplomatic reason. Like, you're not like trashing the Eagles. You just kind of wanted to go your own way. I respect that. And Fred Taylor, Jimmy Smith, especially. I was a big Jimmy Smith fan. Mark Brunell, like, those are some fun teams in those days. So that's cool.
Darnell, man, they were sick. They were so good, and they came out of nowhere, and they made the AFC Championship game in what, like their third or fourth year? It was
They put Dan Marino in a retirement. They beat their, I don't know if you can curse on the show, but they beat their behind 62-7, and it was just, it was amazing. And what I liked about it so much was Jimmy Johnson was the coach of the Cowboys, and he went to Dallas. So I already had like this hate for him kind of because I grew up like, watching the Eagles, and nobody liked, Jim Johnson. So they were, the Jags were able to kind of take them out and send Dan Marino into retirement. So that was really fun. Yeah. Fred Taylor is a little underrated, man. He's not talked about as much as he should be.
Oh my god. Like, truly criminally not mentioned in the top 10 to 15 type of guy all time, given his numbers and longevity. He was fantastic for so long. What a player. And honestly, Laurie, like, that rings a little bit true for me as well. Like, so where I grew up was about 45 minutes from like where the Bills played, right? And I grew up a diehard fan, absolutely, like every Sunday, and I just got more and more of an interest across the entire league. And maybe there's some gambling angles that have to go with that. We'll leave that for the courts. But
I mean, fantasy too.
Yeah, there's too much stuff on a given Sunday. There's so much going on, and I'm happy that the Bills are good. And I was super wrong about Josh Allen, and I'm happy for other fans that they're awesome. But I'm just not as locked in as I was when I was when I was a teenager. It's just the way it goes sometimes,
And Scott, you're a true objective observer. Like, you don't even have, it's not like you vacated or like chosen another team. You just watch the sport as a whole, which is unique.
There's just too much going on. Like, Sundays are just so crazy, and if you're going to watch all day, or you're going to have to be locked in from, let's face it, like 10 a.m. until 10 p.m. basically, right? If with the various, with pools, with the games, with fantasy and all that stuff, it's like, okay, it's great that the Bills are good, but there's so much more to cover. And now with this boom too, like I'm thinking about the Bucs more than any other team, which is pretty funny because like before this wouldn't have given a shit, like unless Jameis gave a pregame speech somewhere that I needed to watch 10 times. So
Oh,
okay.
Jameis.
but anyway.
Anyway, we haven't touched on the big news coming out of Tampa. Really, it was the news of the day and the week in the NFL is Gronk retiring. And I think it's not just big news because of, how accomplished he is as a player or how unique his personality and presence has been in the league. But I think the majority of people expected him to play, and it kind of was feeling like he was dropping hints all over the place. I'm kind of glad I don't have to keep writing articles being like, he said this, so maybe he's coming back.
Yeah.
But he didn't. Like, he's not coming back. He's retired, and I think that caught a lot of people off guard. And although I think Bucs fans are super appreciative of the 2 seasons he gave them, and one of them obviously including a Lombardi trophy, he was awesome. And I've talked a lot about how my perception of Gronk has changed so much, having him play for the team that I follow so closely and the team that I cover. I've learned, like I guess I had this perception that he was just kind of like an attention seeker, kind of like a frat boy. I don't know, just like disingenuous maybe. And I've come to learn he's such a great teammate, and he is like beloved by all his teammates in the locker room. And he contributes to winning a lot more than just catching footballs and laying out defensive ends, chipping them off the edge of the line. So anyway, bit of a shocker, certainly unfortunate for the Buccaneers on paper, because I think this is what I would consider their only true glaring weakness at this point. Like Gronk felt like the final piece of the puzzle of Jason Light's little offseason masterpiece here, where so I don't know what you guys think. What came, like, Scott, for you, what popped into your mind first? Because since you've been covering this team and you've talked so much about Gronk leading up to this decision.
Yeah, well, first of all, and I don't mean to be cynical, or I don't know if this falls under the cynicism bucket here, but like I don't think he's retired, or I don't think he's done. Yep. I just don't. So
okay.
His agent, was it Ari Wasserman or whoever, came out, or Kevin Clark from The Ringer, basically it was 5 minutes after that Instagram post. It's like, yeah, but we'll see. Like
Rosenhaus, yeah.
So, if he's truly done, then wow, what a career. I totally get where you were coming from on not being the biggest Gronk guy, but I think it was really just because New England was so annoying for so many years. If you threw him on a completely neutral team like the Bears or something like that, and he was doing the same thing, I don't think there would have been any animosity towards him whatsoever. I really do think it was more New England based than, his own personality as to where that would have come from. That's just me speaking. I know where you're coming from, Collin, obviously, but
no, you can speak for me on that. You're bang on. Like, I hated Tom Brady. Like,
yeah, well, here we go.
Yeah.
I think you've turned a little bit as it yeah. But yeah, so my gut instinct, my first reaction was that he'll be back for week 9, and he'll be fresh, and he doesn't want to go to training camp.
9?
Yeah, maybe that's overshooting it a bit. Yeah, no kidding. But yeah, that's kind of where I was when I heard it first.
How about you, Laurie?
Yeah, I'm with Scott on this one, because didn't he like pre-record him running and then send it to Bruce Arians so that like he didn't have to report in 2020? So
multiple shirts, so it looked like different days.
Exactly. I mean, this guy does not want to go to training camp.
No kidding. A true playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers moment. I mean, you got to give it up where it's deserved. So
yeah,
exactly. That's the good veteran mentality.
Yeah.
Gronk was a chess star at Arizona too. No one knows that.
Yeah, I know. People don't know that.
No, he was not. He could only play checkers.
Oh, okay. I was like,
sorry,
damn. If gullible definition there.
Now it's gonna come out that Gronk was actually a grandmaster chess player and leading the Pac-10 and whatever rooks. Sure, that's a chess term. Go from there.
I was like, see, me judging a book by its cover. I don't know.
Yeah,
no.
Good for you, calling it the Pac-10 too, Scotty. Dang.
Well, at the time, we got to keep it. We got to keep it relatable here.
I know, that's just why you're here. Like that's sharp, man.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
That's it. The only reason.
limited. That might be it. Seriously.
So, Laurie, where does Gronk rank for you amongst tight ends all time?
I mean, I wouldn't say he's at the top, but he's pretty close. Shannon Sharp was pretty good. There are some other guys that are obviously awesome, and I think that a lot of people nowadays, even though we have the internet and we can search up and look up highlights of amazing players, and not even just highlights, but like how influential or how awesome some of these tight ends were. People are saying that he was number one, and it's just like, do you just forget history? Were you born yesterday? Like, what's going on? But obviously, he's an amazing player. I mean, him and Tom Brady did, but they just had magic there.
Yeah.
With the Patriots. So, and they were able to recreate that obviously with the Bucs, and that's another reason why I don't think he's retiring. I think he's going to stay with Tom Brady until Tom Brady retires. They probably just made a little pact, but I wouldn't say he's like best of all time, but he's definitely up there.
Fair take. Did you guys see that picture of Shannon Sharp with his shirt off the other day?
Yeah. Oh my God.
I did not see that. What the heck is going on with my algorithm? How come I don't see that and you guys do? That's not fair.
Well, we saw it, and dear Lord, he's in his 50s. It's ridiculous.
Unbelievable.
You look like Collin in grade 10.
Yeah, and boy, I'm only 35, and I do not look anywhere near how I did in grade 10.
Yeah.
Wow, I see it now.
Yeah.
I'm gonna turn my camera off for a second. I'll be right back. Wow, that's crazy though. Tight ends really are the most athletic player on a team, and hopefully they don't go away.
And I think
that's crazy.
And I think that leads into the argument, or not argument, but the discussion for Tony Gonzalez potentially being the best, right? Just from productivity every year, can do it all. And how many years did he play and was actually good? Like, was it 18 years, something like that? And another freak athlete. He played basketball at Cal as well, right? Just speaking to what Laurie said about the tight ends being as good athletes as anyone on the team, right? So I think just from a raw numbers and just how long he did it for, it's Gonzalez for me. Maybe Gronk's peak is actually better, but I would give the nod to Gonzalez.
We can't forget about Antonio Gates too. Like he played forever. I don't know how these guys play so long and they're doing all this blocking, and it's just like, it seems like it's the most like in the trenches and then also like skilled. So it's just like, how do you keep it up for so long? But all these guys just don't want to give up.
I think the thing is that none of them ever had breakaway speed, or that was never part of their game. So the fact that they lost a step didn't really affect what they did necessarily, because they still had great hands and they were still huge and could catch the ball and be red zone threats. That's kind of that's what I always thought with Gronk, because it's like, clearly he's not quite as fleet of foot as he was, but so what? Doesn't mean that he was less effective. Hey, Boom? Like, what do you think there?
Yeah, I'd say he proved that in Tampa, man. Like,
that's what I mean. His Tampa.
Yeah. Like, has he always been so lumbering? And I think he has. Like, he's certainly a little bit slower now, but it's just been pretty wild. We got our Bo host here. So how do I get this off?
Little click.
Bo, what's good, man?
What's going on, man? Sorry I'm late.
Hey, man.
What's up?
Hey, meet Laurie.
Hey, what's up, Bo?
Thanks, host Scott. I appreciate that. Nice to meet you, Laurie.
Makes it in.
Nice to meet you.
We were just discussing Rob Gronkowski's ranking all time, and Laurie and Scott are both kind of like, let's not get caught up in the recency bias. He's not quite there, but he's certainly in the conversation. And then we were just kind of viewing it as a bit of a tight end appreciation post or discussion. And I wanted to add to that, like, the one interesting thing. So one of the, not a critique, but if you're like, let's say you're a basketball fan, one of your arguments against football would be maybe it's just a bunch of specialists. Everyone has one job, right? You don't have to play defense. If you throw, you throw. You don't have to catch. You don't have to tackle, etc. Tight end, you do have to be able to do multiple things. You literally occupy two positions. And I think Gronk was a perfect example of that, because he was so dominant as a blocker, right? That's the thing that no one even talked about, like, during those days at New England. But something that was just so nice to have watching him these last 2 seasons. Just how
funny,
impressive.
If he was shittier as a pass catcher, then that's when the blocking finally gets mentioned as a tight end. You know what I mean? If you're less of an actual threat offensively, then it's but he can block and you can play him on all downs kind of thing, right? So yeah, he's just too good. He was just too good.
Yeah. So what I want to do now is I want to just, for our listeners, kind of dive into the current roster at that position post Gronk. What do we have? Of course, Cameron Brate has been, I think he's the third longest serving Buccaneer. He's almost at a decade. He signed as an undrafted free agent out of Harvard. And I mean, I think most of us are familiar with Cam Brate. My thing with Cam Brate is related to what we just talked about. He can catch the ball fine. He's actually got a bit of a propensity to find the end zone over the years, and he's overachieved his whole career. That's why he was undrafted. The fact he's been around this long and made this much money is impressive in its own right. Like, he almost belongs in the undrafted Hall of Fame just for how much money he's made. But he can't, like, he couldn't block a beach ball from rolling into the Gulf of Mexico. Like,
ever tried that, man? Harder than it looks. Just
yeah, it depends on what time of day, Scotty.
Yeah, no kidding.
Depends how long you've been out there.
Yeah, exactly.
With that Bay Breeze, we'll never get it.
So Brate, like, some people are kind of assuming, okay, maybe he's gonna step into this role and just have a monster season or something like that. But I think like Gronk missed a bunch of games last year, and Brate, Bo, I was betting every week Brate over like 3.5 catches or like 30 yards receiving, 29.5. Cause I'm like, if he can't get this, he's useless. He didn't hit it once. So I'm not trying to like rip on Cam Brate. I'm just trying to be realistic in terms of the expectations. It's not his job to fill Gronk's shoes. He's got to be able to stay on the field, stay healthy, and catch some footballs. But I'm not going to all of a sudden expect him to enter some new dimension of production on the field or change who he is what I'm ultimately trying to say.
Yeah, and I think just thinking of Brate, and I think it was even the year before last where it was like, oh, those bets would actually cash because he'd just jump in and the number would be so low. It'd be like, yeah, for sure he can get 2 catches, or for sure he can get 15 yards or whatever. But just asking him to do double that seems to be like an impossibility, basically. So and I think Bruce kind of knew that like throughout the time, right? He was just like, as soon as Gronk's available, this guy is on their back burner, and just kind of like a big jumbo tight end to like say, okay, we're going to get another quick pass out here when they think we're going to run it. But yeah, it's a tough spot, right? As a Bucs fan, I think you've had an embarrassment of riches, and I think this is just like kind of the first little preview of like, hey, it's tough to build a roster like all 22 guys be awesome.
Yeah.
I felt like we were so close. I felt like Jason Light was low key putting together a masterpiece this year.
It was like it would have been a 3-peat for Jason Light, right? Because like
I'm sure Laurie can weigh in. It's like, oh no, the Bucs don't have 22 Pro Bowlers to start this year. Fuck, what are we gonna do? Ugh.
Well, you have Tom Brady, so
yeah, exactly. I think he counts.
Well. Anyway, so Cam Brate is Cam Brate, unless anyone wants to jump in. Like, Laurie, I don't know if when you were doing your Cade Otton tape study or if you have anything to add on Cam Brate.
Well, I just, when I released the article about Cade, one of the responses was like, yo, how are you just going to throw Cameron Brate to the side? Like, he doesn't matter and like act like he doesn't exist and like all this stuff. And I don't really have an opinion on him. Like, he did what he needed to do, like, but you can't just expect him to be, so much better than what he is. So that's why I just think it was important to kind of look forward to Cade, because I think he's a better all around player. Obviously, Cameron, was suffice, but I think it was important to kind of look forward, for the Bucs.
Perfect. I agree. And just because you cover another player doesn't mean you're neglecting another one. Like, are you supposed to cover every single player on the roster in one article?
Yeah. It's like the McDonald's guy that, brought McDonald's for his son. Like, do I have to bring the McDonald's to all the kids, or can I just feed my kid,
when I was reading your article, I was like, why is she not talking about Akeem Hicks? This is really weird.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. But I think that's dead on about Brate. He will suffice. I think he could be a totally league average tight end if given like a full slate of games and targets and all that. I think he's fine. Is he great? No. Does he need to be? Probably not. But I think that's kind of like, the like where he would fall kind of thing.
Yeah, it's to be expected, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, and the reason I first connected with Laurie is because I read her article on Cade Otton, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was super in-depth, super detailed. You had the video clips to back up your takes, and it was obvious you'd done your homework. And I mean, immediately the expectations for him are going to increase dramatically. I mean, that's just inevitable based on Gronk leaving. And so for anyone who doesn't know, and I don't know why you'd be listening to this podcast if you didn't, other than if you're my mother or something, but Cade Otton, Bucs selected him in the 4th round, as predicted by yours truly, with the 106th pick, and great value there for the Bucs, that's for sure. So Laurie, I want you, why did you decide to take a deep dive on Cade Otton in the first place? That's what I'm curious about. And what jumped out at you most in doing so? So I'm going to give you a little open-ended question to kind of take it with where you want to.
Well, first, if I could write about, the second tier players that have a chance to kind of make it, that's what I love writing about. But unfortunately, that doesn't get all the clicks, right? What does get clicks is relevancy. So, just being honest, the first reason why I decided to write on him was because Gronk retired. So I started looking into their roster, their depth, and the first thing that jumped out at me though was how Cade he dropped a little bit in the draft. But I'll kind of do a little bit of background, maybe on Twitter, do some searches on just like people's opinion on the players. And one of the first things I saw was back in 2020, PFF labeled him as, the 3rd best tight end in all of college football. And, Kyle Pitts was number 1. So I was just like, then he dropped into the 4th round. So it was just like, where did this guy go? Then, I watched his tape a little bit. Then I realized, he got injured, and that all happened during COVID. So him just only playing 4 games and being one of the top 5 tight ends in college football just really intrigued me. So I decided to just dive a little bit deeper and, why PFF felt that way, and then why he dropped so far into the draft and he was just non-existent in 2021, like according to the media and all of the rankings and everything. So I just thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, super cool. And you're right. That's a perfect excuse to write about one of those guys you mentioned, like sort of just slightly out of the periphery or in the periphery, lurking there. And it's always nice to have done some due diligence on a player before they kind of bust out, right? And it's like, yeah, I was on that first.
Yeah, and it is the off season, right? And I love just like evaluating players in general. So that's one of my favorite things to do. Because writing about schemes and certain things that happened last year, like it's awesome to look back on things, but it's always, I guess, more fun to kind of look at, okay, what is this guy's potential and really look at what he does on film, because not a lot of, a lot of people watch college football, but a lot of diehard NFL fans, they're not, watching every single football game. So especially not the Huskies, Washington. So it's just like, I like diving into the film and providing, the fans with a deeper dive that they probably not going to get elsewhere, because, ESPN's not going to talk about, a tight end that's a rookie that got drafted in the 4th round behind someone that is already a suffice, player in Cameron. So, it's always good to kind of dive deeper and say, okay, like, can this guy actually fill the role? And like, what does he do well? And where are his areas that he needs to maybe do a little bit better? But I try not to touch on the bad side as much as the good side, just, but that's why I'm here now. 'Cause I get to talk about maybe the, I don't want to say weaknesses, but areas that maybe this guy needs to focus on. Because, I've done weaknesses in articles and players respond like really upset. And I was a player at one time. So like, I know what it's like for someone to talk, about me when there's nothing but potential going forward, especially if you're like so young. So it's always kind of good to show the fans what they do have. If this player stays along that same line. Right.
So in terms of his strengths, let's start with that, Laurie. What do you think are Cade Otton's greatest strengths that you saw from going back and watching the tape at Washington?
So one of the parts of the article that I wrote about were his hands, and I do think that's his best trait. It's not just catching; it's just the way he catches the ball. Honestly, it's how he doesn't break stride when he's running across the middle. He's always mirroring the QB, and I know that's not something that he's going to have to do with Tom Brady, because Tom's not really rolling out of the pocket, and he has to mirror him down the field and show him that he's open. But that is a strength, though, that he does well. He tries to always keep the play alive. But one of the best things to watch is when he is catching the ball in traffic. He's able to concentrate really well, see it in. He catches it, and he always tries to go for more. Like, he doesn't just obviously fall to the ground. He has good ball skills, so he can run after the catch. And even if he's, a couple yards short from the first down, he's probably going to get the first down. He does jump balls pretty well, actually. I did post a couple clips of him catching the ball, but in the article, there's a slow-mo of him, I think it's a corner route that he runs, and it's pretty deep too. And it was definitely contested. There were two defenders coming in, and he does not care. Like, he has that concentration and that play speed and strength, and the football IQ to go, if I just catch this and go to the ground, that's more important than getting sandwiched between two guys. Cause he's a big guy. Tight ends, they're able to take a bunch of hits, and he's definitely that prototype tight end that will put his body on the line to make a catch in traffic.
And to block, right? Like, that's one of the things I like, how you hit on his blocking, not just, in pass protection, but in the run game as well. Speak to what he is as a blocker, Laurie.
Yeah. So that was, I wouldn't say I went off in the beginning about the blocking, but it annoys me that, tight ends that are good at blocking, and we kind of touched on this earlier, they're not as mentioned as much if they can't receive, or oh, well, at least he can block. But it's not really like, man, this is a really good blocker. You're not really going to talk about it. It's not on the stat sheet. Only if you're a diehard fan, or, you're really watching the game, in detail, or you play on the team. You're not really
offensive lineman, the way it's discussed at that point, right? If you're not a real receiving threat. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just I hate the fact that we're judging tight ends and ranking them just in terms of the receiving skills. So he is a pretty good blocker too. I do think that against the elite guys, except for Aiden Hutchinson, he pretty much manhandled him. But as far as the guys that can jump off the line really quick, at the snap, they're maybe on the backside of a run play, he's blocking the backside defensive end. Sometimes that backside defensive end will actually get to the play. So there were a couple, times, but I guess, we're going to get into the weaknesses, but sorry, his strengths in blocking are pretty decent though. He's a pretty good all around blocker. I would say his run blocking is a lot better than his pass protection. It would be a mismatch against linebackers, that's for sure, that are blitzing.
It's a little bit tough too, I think, this year, just because Washington was so shitty after being good for a few years leading up to it, right? They had a terrible year and a terrible offense in general. And, they just had a game manager before that, not Jake Browning as the quarterback, but kind of a little bit harder to really assess any prospect on a pretty dysfunctional offense. So, that's
awesome. He was in a mostly, a running offense, and he still did pretty well. So in terms of receiving, so I mean, he has more experience blocking, and that's where I think he's going to do well and pair well with Fournette. I know that Fournette may be a little bit down on the depth chart, but how I like Fournette. So, but I think he's going to be a really good run blocker.
Not on this podcast. He's not down on the depth chart. Let me tell you.
That's good.
He
good.
can
That's
start
my boy.
A quarterback as far as we're concerned.
Damn right.
Oh, man.
Bell Cow Lennon. Bell cow Lenny, man. We'll probably get to Lenny towards the end. I want to stick on topic, like sticky, like Cade Otton's hands, because what about sorry, one other thing I wanted to just kind of add to, as you're talking about, or as we discussed, maybe he has limited production in college, partially could be attributed to like unimpressive quarterback play, more of a run-based scheme on offense.
Yes.
But also I think it's important to acknowledge that generally statistical production from the tight end position is not something that's usually very explosive at the collegiate level. You look at some of the best tight ends in the NFL, and they weren't shit in college if you look at the box scores only, right? So it's so much more about that scout, like actually watching the tape.
Took the words out of my mouth. I was just about to say, I feel, but then I wasn't 100% sure, so I wasn't going to throw it out there. But I feel like we get super productive tight ends in the NFL, and you see their senior year at, well, it's either Iowa or Virginia. Those are the two every single time. And they had 437 yards or something like that, right?
Yeah, or they averaged 13 and 8 on in the NCAA tournament. They weren't even on the football field.
Well, if you played at Virginia and you averaged 13, you would have been the high scorer. But but like George Kittle, for example, and that actually was Iowa. I don't think he had insane numbers, and I know that's just cherry picking one, but boom, you're 100% right. It's more about seeing what they can do and looking at the tape and what they project out to be, as opposed to production in college. That's just like from a tertiary kind of 20,000 foot view.
So Laurie, great job assessing some of his specific strengths. What do you think he'll need to work on or improve upon most in order to stay on the field as a rookie? What are his weaknesses?
I would really just say his pass blocking against those bigger DNs. He does an okay job, but it just seems like the dominant guys have a quicker jump than him. When he's kind of backing up to obviously get into his pass block stance, kind of like, what the offensive linemen do. They can get around him pretty easily, obviously, if they're, faster and stronger. But that sounds like obvious, right? Anybody that's faster and stronger. So honestly, it would really just be him not gaining more weight, maybe just a little bit, but just having better hand work when you are kind of going against those ends, because you want to be able to hold them off as long as possible. So I just think it's something that maybe, it could be a weight thing, and that would really be his, like, there's not too much of a downfall, to be honest. No. Like, I didn't see it, just because the only time he didn't catch the ball was when the quarterback didn't throw it on target. So I can't even say that there was a weakness in his receiving game. It really just looked like blocking a lot of the time.
But that feels coachable, and now football is his job. So he'll get even stronger. He'll be all hand placement, everything like that will just be worked on and drilled on him every day. And those seem like very doable kind of targets for him, right? Yeah,
and what I liked most really about his blocking was how he finished a lot of the blocks. So he could take an impact pretty hard. When I was watching, which game was it? I'm not sure if it was Utah or Arizona. There was, they were in the red zone, and he picked up 2 blitzers at one time. And these guys are coming full speed from the second line of the defense and coming right through, and he's putting his nose right with theirs. He's not shying away from contact. A lot of times when he was either setting the edge or putting the guy to the outside for the running back to run off of his back, he's blocking to the ground. So he's definitely a finisher, and that tenacity is something that you can't coach. Yeah. So he does have that that will to finish the block all the way to the ground. So that's definitely an upside.
The thing I'm starting to feel like Cade Otton is kind of what you would call like a high ceiling, high floor guy. So in a lot of ways, he fits the box of you're going to get worst case that Austin Hooper style production, like a big body there who's got enough grit to get it done and good enough hands to catch the ball, right? But then at the same time, it seems like he has enough traits that he could potentially hit and become much more than that, which would make him tremendous value based on where he was taken, 106th overall. So
yeah, One thing though, like I didn't mention about his strengths, are his route running too. So when he had to move defenders, whether that's in zone just to kind of freeze them, or if it was, him coming out of his stem in man to man, I think he takes, some misdirection steps to move guys, and the way that he uses his body, coming out of like his break or something like that, or even just using head fakes when he's coming out of his break, looking directly in and then cutting it out. Those little things. And then he's such a good, contested catcher that I think people are going to be more impressed with his route running than anything.
Love it. I love it. Keep going. No,
Yeah.
So why do you think this is my last one I got? So if anyone else has another question on Cade Otton, because that's what we're talking about with Laurie Fitzpatrick of USA Today, in case you're just tuning in to our live show here. Shout out to Neil L on YouTube. What it do, baby? But yeah, so Laurie wrote an awesome article breaking down Cade Otton's tape, and he's all of a sudden become even more of an important figure for the Buccaneers this season, which will be his rookie season. I want to know, because you even mentioned PFF, for example, had him as like entering the 2020 season as the third best tight end. And of course, we already talked about it. COVID struck. He had some injuries, so he missed a lot of time. But why was he the fifth tight end drafted, do you think? Like, we got Trey McBride, Jelani Woods, Greg Dulcich, and Jeremy Ruckert all going off the board before him. What do you think hurt his stock, Laurie? Like, do you have any – is it just that he missed too many games? And
yeah, I mean, it's, the league is not what you can do for me. It's what can you do for me now, right? So he only played 4 games. So it's like, what do they have to go off of? And the draft is all about the noise. It's all about like, let's post clips of what they just did because their whole future is in question if they, missed anything in the last couple months. So it's just like out of sight, out of mind.
yeah,
That's why I think he's going to be a lot better than, and I don't like people watching this and say, oh my God, she's going to predict that he's going to be the next, all pro. That's stupid, right? But I just think his fundamentals are good enough. If he's able to take that next step, he will be able to do pretty well, just based on what he showed in college. But it was really just him missing games. In 2021, he only played 4.
Yeah.
So I just think that's what the analysts, that's what they look at. They're so pressed to push out so many like rankings and everything else. They're not going to waste their time on 2020 film, like unless they were already like top of the top. So they're not going to look back and base him off that. They're going to look back to 2021. They see he only played 4 games. So
that makes a lot of sense. And tight end also feels like a position where a team might just like one guy better for whatever reason, and then that could drop the next tight end a whole nother round, right? Because there are only so many taken in a given year, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and then you think about the type of offense he was in. So it's like, how many chances did he actually get?
Yeah.
Could he really show, what he could do? There are a lot of times where players in college are actually in the wrong position, and maybe they don't get drafted, and then they come into the NFL, and then coach is like, "Oh, you're supposed to be here." Then they're amazing, right?
Yeah,
so,
right.
like Lamar Jackson at quarterback.
Yeah.
it's crazy. So, I'm just glad that Gronk retired and I was able to watch his film because, like you mentioned, Scott, I didn't even really know about Cade that much. Just kind of learning more about the draft in these last 2 years because I was really just stuck in the NFL. I didn't really get to watch a lot of 2020 either. So now I was kind of able to kind of go back and check out what he was able to do. So I just think he was in a less fortunate situation. And then obviously that foot injury, so he didn't attend anything either. So that also hurt him as well because of that injury.
Yeah, and then you got combine and workout risers, right? Guys like Jelani Woods, who shot up draft boards based on their physical intangibles. And like you said, Laurie, then all of a sudden someone like Cade Otton kind of gets lost in the shuffle a little bit. And
Mhm.
hopefully that, hopefully him getting lost is the Bucs gain in the end, because they certainly have a need for tight end, especially now. Shout out to Rock813, new to the show in the chat. Appreciate you, Rock813. We're talking Bucs. We're talking tight ends with Laurie Fitzpatrick of USA Today, and getting some fantastic intel on a deep dive Laurie just did on Cade Otton.
Also, can you just say also Cade Otton, just a great football name.
Yeah.
Right?
Cade.
How do we not
Sounds
touch
tight
on
end.
that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, come on.
I'm with that for sure. I
Yeah.
agree. Kid's got to be
So-
nails.
So what's the final verdict? Are we thinking Cade's going to end up with that starting job or what?
I think.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I mean, if he builds the rapport with Tom Brady, I think it's all about what Tom has to say. It'll probably. I think Brandon Thorne touched on their situation as well. He wrote an article saying that it would be kind of it would be split. The touches would be split until maybe one of them takes off, but they would really kind of battle between them.
Yeah, I think it's going to come down, you're right. And Tom Brady's got to win this year more than anyone. I mean, it's probably very likely his last season, of course. So as much as he has earned to have a say in that locker room and with personnel things, I feel like it's got to be at an all-time high for him. I mean, if Brady says get Cade on the damn field, I think Todd Bowles is going to appease him, as long as it's not on the defensive end. He doesn't want him in there at edge rusher or something like that. And yes, Rock813, Cade already seems like a beast. Yeah, man, we're going to have – this will be posted after too, so you did miss most of our Cade Otton discussion, but tons of good tidbits in there by Laurie, as mentioned, and I'll be sure to share her article again within the actual YouTube description when I get a chance to alter that.
That bump.
What's that?
That bump and run, he knocked Hutchinson, down pretty. It was pretty funny when I watched that on film. I was over here laughing to myself in a room that was super quiet when I saw him knock over Hutchinson. So I think he's exciting.
In a room that was super quiet makes it so much better too. I like that you had that.
I think Hutchinson got held on that play. Just sight unseen. I remember it, and held. I think 3 guys. I think he got tripped too. Yeah, other than
Probably
that,
tripped, right? Yeah,
easy.
It's Urban Meyer. Urban Meyer came out of nowhere and just.
Don't worry, I got a couple Urban Meyer questions for Laurie on the back end. Don't
no.
about it.
He also, like you mentioned, the Utah game, he lined up against Devin Lloyd, right? That was a guy he was able to hold his own against, who's an impressive NFL prospect, as I'm sure you're very excited about, Laurie, to get him where you did. But I do want to shift to, because yes, okay, so that's exciting. Cade Otton looks great. We love that. Okay, Cameron Brate, as long as he is what he is and he can stay on the field, I would expect him to contribute in the passing game specifically. But the need for a blocking tight end, whether they go 11 or 12 personnel, I mean, that's going to vary depending on who's available. But the Bucs also drafted 2 tight ends, don't forget, and they moved up. They traded 2 picks to get a guy named Ko Keefe, who so many people had no idea who he was. And he ultimately is probably the best blocking tight end in the country. So that's a specialist on the blocking side of things. Kind of reminds me of Anthony Auclair, former player out of Laval who played for the Bucs. He was last with the Houston Texans. And he made a real name for himself in Tampa just by being a blocking specialist. That's what the Bucs are going to expect from Ko Keefe, the Chief. And we had our publisher Logan Robinson. He was at all the Bucs OTAs and rookie minicamp, and he said it was pretty obvious that they were really trying to force feed the ball to Ko Keefe, even though he only had like 7 catches in college. So just another name to keep an eye on there in terms of the in-house options, who the Buccaneers already have.
I'm dying laughing because I remember seeing his name when he got drafted. I never looked up his picture. Ko Keefe looks like looks like Ryan Jensen had a baby with Ryan Jensen.
That's good. You're right. And just right on brand with that, man. I don't know if you saw, he was best family draft footage I've ever seen, as they were watching it in a garage. His uncle's French inhaling a cigarette. His mom's shotgunning a natty light.
Couple natty lights they had. Yeah, absolutely.
The Viking boat in the back, just on the wall.
Yeah.
It was amazing. And Rock813 says Cade and Brate could be a dangerous tight end duo. I will give you this, Rock813. on YouTube. The fact is, they certainly would complement each other well in the sense that, if Cade's proves to be apt as a blocker right away and can kind of adjust to that NFL athleticism and physicality, it's going to allow Brate to simply continue to play his role and not feel any sort of pressure to become something he's not. But and then, so in terms of free agency, though, there are some veteran options available still. And I mentioned off the top, the majority of big name players have landed with a team. But there are a few names that we've seen a lot over the years, gotten very familiar with. I wrote a piece about this on SI for Bucs Game Day. And the names that I brought up that I just want to throw out all together, and we can kind of see, ask you guys if any pop out at you, is Kyle Rudolph, Eric Ebron, Jared Cook, and Jimmy Graham. All vets, and all players I think will at the very least be under consideration. I don't think Jason Light's going to be panicky or anything like that. I think he, whatever. But do any of those names strike any sort of interest or appeal to you from a Buccaneers perspective? Bo, I know you're a Jared Cook guy, dude. Come on now.
No, I don't know. I just feel like you Bucs fans are just kind of falling in love with the name more than anything at this point. And I love Jared Cook. I think he's a good option for a team like this, but I don't know. I don't think you really need to go out and get another tight end right now.
I
think you guys are good with where you're at. Maybe not have a former Pro Bowler at one position at least.
Yeah, Colin, and especially when you asked, do those names do anything for you? No, they do not. And I can't quit Eric Ebron. He's actually starting in my fantasy baseball team this summer because I just can't, let go of him. But no, I don't think any of them are, tilting it too much for the Bucs. I think if they like what they have, then that's fine. Also, hearkening back to what we said about Gronk potentially coming back or, unretiring, however you need to label it. There's that. So I don't know. Those guys aren't doing a ton for me personally. I can kind of see why some teams would be interested, and especially pairing any of them with a great quarterback. I get it. It's just not doing it for me.
And I think it might just end up being a wait and see approach. Jason Light's not going to panic on this, and you never know who's going to become available in the trade market. Guys on expiring deals, or maybe a team. Some shit happens, and Schultz from Dallas is a name that's been rumored as a potential trade option at some point. You never know what could happen. So we'll kind of see what plays out there. I tend to agree with you guys in terms of those guys are all status quo. So if there's 4 of them out there, what's the rush? 3 of those guys aren't all of a sudden going to sign, and you're not going to have an option. The one thing I'll disagree with is that they don't need one potentially. I think another veteran who has ability and experience could be useful, just based on the fact that 2 of the Buccaneers playable tight ends at this point are rookies. I mean, to me, that's a concern. The one veteran who you could rely on is Cam Brady, strictly receiver, that I'm just beating over the head that point. Poor Cam. Sorry, dude. I know we get it. You're not the best blocker. You can catch though. Anyway, so that's kind of where that stands. And I think I think we've done a good job of digging really deep into Cade Otton, which is a name that Bucs fans are going to need to get familiar with. We've paid homage to one Rob Gronkowski. Bo, I don't know if you have any thoughts you wanted to catch up on it. I feel like you joined us during the Gronk talk, right?
No, I think I was right at the tail end of it, but
so before, what do you?
Gronk's awesome. Who? Yeah. Unless you just absolutely hate Boston, which I know a lot of people like that actually, but Gronk was always a guy that you kind of had a soft spot for. So to see him go out like this, and to on top of that, not really pay any mind to the Patriots was nice. It was really fun while it lasted, and I think I'm right with Scott in saying I'm not totally sure that he's done.
Well, I got to give it to you, man. It was a couple episodes ago. It was a month ago. You were oddly confident he was going to come back mid-season.
Yeah, I just feel like if it's Tom Brady's last year and it's apparent, and he's just sitting at home, and he's I could definitely play for 6 weeks in the playoffs. I don't know. I it's his best friend, his obviously his best football friend, and maybe his best friend in life in general. Why wouldn't he just come off of his couch and be yeah, I can do this?
Fair. Well, folks, I think we have exceeded our quota for time this evening, and glad we got all three of us in here, and especially glad we got Laurie Fitzpatrick for her first ever appearance on the Bucs Banter podcast. Laurie, you were fantastic, and I can't tell you guys enough. You should check out her work at Touchdown Wire. Follow her on Twitter at Laurie Fitzpatrick, but it's spelled different, so you can see it on the screen. I've retweeted some of her stuff, so make sure you follow me at SI Buccaneers. And you can catch all my written work at si.com/NFL/Buccaneers or straight at bucksgameday.com. Where our podcasts are available for streaming through your preferred podcast service. Make sure you like and subscribe on YouTube. We appreciate you for listening. And until next time, go Bucs.